Welcome to 2 cents short of a dollar, the show where we give our 2 cents and keep it 100. We're your host. That's Mo. I'm Rue. Today we got a special guest, my man Kev in the building. Talk about some NBA stuff because right now the NBA's been on fire. But I want to kind of start with the Bucks. So the Milwaukee Bucks, they go ahead. They were second in the East, by the way, and they fire Adrian Griffin and they bring in Doc Rivers. Kind of similar to like a David Blatt situation with the Cleveland Cavaliers back in the day. Not back in the days, but with the whole bringing in Ty Lue. But I guess what's different here is Ty Lue was on the staff. You know what I mean? Doc Rivers wasn't on this staff anywhere. So, Kev, I'm gonna let you go first. Just what you think about the firing, and just what do you think what was the reason behind it, or how do you feel about it actually?
No, definitely, absolutely. I think you brought up the perfect comparison with David Blatt, right? You see the success, some success on the court, but something behind the scenes just isn't clicking, right? And all day long, you always hear people talk about the locker room has to be a fit, like everybody has to be cohesive, has to be in a unit. So that's the only thing that I could really bring to light. There has to have been something in the locker room that just wasn't clicking, right? Number 2 seed, so they had some success on the court. Obviously, the defense wasn't where they wanted it to be, but you gave up some key pieces, right? To bring in Dame, which is primarily a scoring guard, you're not really going to get a lot of defense from him. So that was expected. That sway from more of a defensive-minded team to an offensive-minded team. So it confused me in a sense, but I understand them wanting to bring in that more of a championship. You can call it culture, but more of the experience in a certain sense when you bring in Doc.
Yeah. So I'll jump in, Mo. Like what I think about this is obviously I think there was some kind of negativity in the locker room. I don't know for sure, but if I had to guess, I would think maybe Damian Lillard didn't like just the way things were going. I know his like percentages have been a little bit down this season. However, it's a huge adjustment playing with another superstar. Because when you're the sole superstar, you do like whatever you want, whenever you want. But now playing with Giannis, there's probably a couple plays in a row where you don't get touches, and you're still expected to stay in rhythm. You know what I'm saying? So playing with other stars in itself, I think, is a skill in its own. But I think maybe they just looked at Boston and say, hey, that team's too far out of reach. We need a shift. But if you ask me to guess, I would think Lillard wasn't happy with just the way things were going at the moment. I think he spoke up, but he had to also have had Giannis's blessing, I believe, for this to take place. So I feel like Lillard, spoke up about this. Like, hey, I don't really like how the offense is being ran, and Giannis had to just say, yeah, I'm with you. And then we see David Griffin go. Adrian Griffin go from there. What you think, Mo?
So I do agree with the both of you that this issue stems from the locker room, right? It's a relationship base. It's not necessarily a success factor that played a role, right? Because you got a coach, that had a really good start, right? 30-13 head start for the Bucks as a first-year head coach. But I think things started to the seeds were sown, especially when Terry Stotts quit, right? And this stems from, I guess, a disagreement between Terry Stotts, and Adrian Griffith, right? And he and remember, Terry Stotts was one of the assistant coaches for the Blazers as well. So he has a good relationship with Damian Lillard. So to your point, Rue, I do think, the relationship and Damian Lillard being a part of that equation does play a role, but I think it has more to do with probably Giannis and the rest of the Bucks staff or the team, right? Like Lopez, right? We've seen Lopez start, expressing, his frustrations on the court, especially with some of like the drop coverages and the defensive schemes that he's been a part of. So I think it has more to do with the team that was already there as opposed to Damian Lillard. But I do think Damian Lillard was on board with the issues that has been happening, especially how they react to Adrian Griffith, right? Like Giannis, right? Like not even talking to him and just kind of sitting to the side, like the lack of respect there for the head coach. So that's my
Yeah. And then and like you said, Adrian Griffin was a first year head coach. I think he was doing well. If you ask me, I don't think he got a fair shake. No. But I guess this happens all the time in the league. People are set up to fail. Some people are in a good situation and somehow they still fail based on other things. I guess the real question, left now is, so Doc Rivers comes in, does that make a big difference? Does that take the Bucks to a different realm that they weren't in before? Or are they just the same team and this is just like mental for them? They're just like trying to like save themselves mentally. Like, oh yeah, we're good now. We got Doc Rivers as a head coach. What you think, Kev?
That's a good point. He definitely didn't get a fair shake, right? I mean, I think I think we all agree on that in terms of Adrian Griffith. Bringing in Doc, I like Doc. I know he gets a lot of slack because he hasn't won the way that it's been expected in the playoffs, and especially when it comes to championships. Um, I looked it up. I saw a stat the other day that there's only been 16 coaches that have won more than one championship, and that's in the 75 years of the league, right? So to say that he's hasn't lived up to expectations because he only has one championship, that's that's being a little critical of him, in my opinion. I do think that when it comes down to playoff time, X's and O's, you need a defensive stop or especially like an out of bounds play, that he may be better suited for those type of situations than say Adrian Griffith. I think the Bucks were looking at that championship window, and our championship window is now, right? So we don't have time to learn on the fly. Give him some time to grow as a coach. So I personally, I like the move, and I do think it'll move the needle somewhat. I don't think it will move it to the point where they're automatically going to be in like the finals. Like you could just pencil them in. That's just my thoughts.
Yo, if I keep it 100 on the Bucks, bro, I think the Bucks are overestimating themselves. I do think they're a good team. I like Giannis. I think he's unstoppable just based on the structure of the game, structure of like reffing. They let him travel a lot, throw a lot of bowls in there, and dunk on people. You know what I'm saying? But the Bucks won a championship, right? And my man Jeff Teague went on record on his podcast and said, "Yo, we thought we were defeated because we were getting our ass kicked, right?" But then he said, as soon as Kyrie got hurt, he's like, we look like, oh, nah, there's life, right? And remember, the Bucks end up winning that series. They beat the Nets, they beat the Suns in the finals, and all of a sudden they're just like, yo, it's championship or bust with us. You know what I'm saying? And it's just like, I don't know if y'all are really those guys or not those guys. But anyway, Drew Holiday, who was a focal point of that championship, they let him go into, in the whole mix up to get Damian Lillard back. So now you got another superstar who's already been telling people, yo, time is ticking. I'm trying to win a chip, right? Adrian Griffin, I don't think was doing anything wrong. But, Doc, there's a stigma, and I do think Doc's a good coach, but there's a stigma like, yo, Doc, Doc's that guy, championship guy. And unfortunately, I think the league has kind of left Doc Rivers behind. I don't think he's up to date with the current offenses and the schemes that are being run. I think he wants to, run a team in a more traditional way, slow it down. People are using pick and rolls, but I just think he's really trying to slow the game down, feed the big man in the post, and I just don't necessarily think that's the game anymore. I think the game has left Doc Rivers behind. I do, I'm good with him winning the championship. Your point was an excellent point that not a lot of people win multiple championships, but I do think he's living off that championship. He continues to get jobs. I'm not saying he shouldn't get jobs, but he continues to get jobs, and people are like, yo, we got Doc now. It's over. We're about to win it. And I honestly, if I be real, for real, he's living off of Paul Pierce kind of getting the better of Kobe one series. If I'm just keeping it all the way real, I do think head to toe the Celtics were a better team, but Paul Pierce outplayed Kobe, and then the Celtics won, and now Doc solidified. You know what I'm saying? And I just don't know that he makes a difference here. But whatever, I'm gonna stop ranting. Go ahead, Mo.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. I do think Doc is probably the better option in terms of postseason experience. I just don't know how that will translate, come actual team success and chemistry. And I think, like you mentioned, there's a stigma with Doc, but I think it's actually negative, at least to the masses, right? That actually watch basketball, with him blowing 3-1 leads and his record, when he's leading a series. But I think it's to the point now there where they feel as though, and I think there's some unluckiness there with Doc Rivers, right, during his tenure as a head coach. But I also feel like they overly criticize Doc Rivers. But I do agree with you, Rue, in terms of his style. But some coaches definitely have their, ups and downs. Like even Nick Nurse, fantastic coach, but he's not even the perfect coach, right? And he hasn't.
I love Nick Nurse,
right? Great coach, right? But like, how many championships do you think he will win when his coaching career is over? Probably not any more that he's already accomplished thus far, right? To Cap's point. So when we look at it from a larger picture, yeah, we can pick apart a coach's, career if we have them under the microscope, but we got to look at kind of what they're able to do with what they have. And I think, Doc Rivers can probably pull in a bit more success compared to Adrian Griffin when it comes to the postseason. But like you mentioned, I don't think it's going to be like a championship guaranteed.
Yeah. Okay. And then one thing that just came to mind, I'm gonna probably end off this topic in this regard. If the Bucks don't win the championship, who do you think is gonna be more to blame? Is it gonna be more Giannis or Lillard? Let's take Doc out of this. We know they're gonna
Oh,
kill
yeah,
Doc,
I'm about to say.
but we know they're gonna kill Doc. But
Yeah.
are they gonna look at Giannis and say, "Listen, you got the help you were asking for, and you weren't able to get it done," or they're gonna look at the Lillard and almost say the same thing, like, "Yo, you wanted a good team built around you. Instead, you went to a good team with another superstar. You weren't able to get it done." Who do you think gets more blame if the Bucks don't win the championship?
Me personally, I think Dame gets most of the blame, right? Because Dame's narrative has always been he doesn't have the talent around him, right? Superstar player, clutch time performer, regular season and playoff time. Now they put you in a situation where you're surrounded with a championship caliber team, right? You have another co-superstar who's always in the running for the MVP. So if you can't lead that team to a greater level of success than they've had in the recent past, not even counting the championship, then what did you bring to the table? Then are you the problem, right? Either chemistry, style of play, but then I do think it falls on Dame.
Yeah. I have to actually agree with that one. One, because I think Giannis is like the league's Cinderella darling situation. I don't think anyone's really gonna say anything bad about Giannis. They just love Giannis. You know what I'm saying? But I do think because also because he's won it before in the past. People are gonna look at Dame. I've heard some comparisons saying Dame's like the new Iverson and stuff like that. So imagine them pairing Iverson up with a superstar. You know what I'm saying? Iverson going to go play with Tim Duncan and not winning with, what I'm saying, something like
Yeah.
that. So I do think Dame's going to take the brunt of the blame outside of Doc Rivers. I do think Dame's going to take the brunt of the blame. Yeah, because like that has been a narrative. If you put Dame with somebody, i.e. Mo, i.e. Rel, give Dame somebody, and Dame is winning the whole thing. You know what I'm saying? So it's like if that don't happen, I do think they're gonna look at Dame, especially with his shooting numbers slipping. I mean, the percentages may come back up, but I know it's kind of looking like a bit of an off year shooting wise. So I do think they probably point the finger at Dame.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say, really, right? Where the NBA decides to go. I'm inclined to agree with the both of you that the media or the masses may blame Dame, but I think ultimately it comes down to who performs better in the postseason. Unless we have a crazy situation, kind of like LeBron averaging 19 points against the Mavs, right? Or like because people did give Giannis some flack when Toronto decided to go zone against him and beat him, and then people say, "Oh, you can't shoot. He will never win with the Bucks, unless he gets a jump shot until you prove them wrong." But I do think him winning a championship actually helped this case to now where it's like, Dame, you haven't won a championship, so now you're here, and we don't win. It kind of is on you. But then if Giannis kind of falls short, he has one of those weird postseasons. I can also see them blaming Giannis as being the leader of that team because it is Giannis's team. The Bucks belongs to Giannis, and then Damian Lillard is a second-tier elite superstar on that team, right? But honestly, just given the way how Dame was like, I'm gonna stay with Blazer, then change his mind. I was like, you know what, nah, why now I want to go play elsewhere, and force the trade. And now you with the Bucks, now you got an elite superstar along with you, got a decent team, Now what? Now what's your excuse, right? So I'm leaning towards the blame shifting towards Damian Lillard, but I think it's close.
Okay. Yeah. And it'll probably help if they take the Nass's spot and give it to a real NBA player, but that's neither here or there.
Oh, please.